The rain pounded against the windows of the small apartment, a relentless reminder of the storm brewing inside. Daniel sat at the kitchen table, his eyes fixed on the spreadsheet in front of him, trying to ignore the growing pit in his stomach. The numbers blurred together, a mess of savings calculations and future plans, all leading toward the dream they had been working towards, a house of their own. "Hey, Danny," came a voice from behind him. It was Emily, his wife of 3 years, her tone light and casual. She leaned against the doorframe, her phone clutched in her hand, a faint smile playing on her lips. Daniel turned, forcing a smile. "Hey, Em. Just going over the savings again? We're getting close, you know." She nodded, but her eyes were distant, her mind elsewhere. "Yeah, that's great." He noticed the way she fiddled with her phone, the way her eyes darted to it every few seconds. "Everything okay?" he asked, trying to keep his voice steady. "Yeah, just work stuff," she replied, too quickly. Daniel's suspicion, which had been a quiet whisper at the back of his mind for weeks, grew louder. He watched her leave the room, her fingers tapping away on her phone. He had to know. That night, after Emily had fallen asleep, Daniel slipped out of bed and retrieved her phone from the nightstand. His heart pounded in his chest as he unlocked it, feeling a mix of guilt and desperation. He scrolled through her messages, his eyes widening with each word. There it was, undeniable proof of her betrayal. Messages to someone named Jake filled with flirtations and plans to meet. The next morning, Daniel confronted her, unable to contain his anger any longer. "Who's Jake?" he demanded, his voice sharp and accusing. Emily's face went pale, her eyes wide with shock. "Danny, it's not what you think." "Not what I think," he interrupted, his voice rising. "You're cheating on me while we're saving for a house? While I'm working extra hours to make this happen for us." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but Daniel felt no sympathy. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she said, her voice trembling. "We just connected. You've been so focused on work and the house, and I felt alone." "Alone," Daniel scoffed, his anger boiling over. "I've been doing all of this for us, Emily, for our future, and this is how you repay me." She reached out to touch him, but he pulled away, disgusted. "Danny, please, I still love you. It was a mistake." "A mistake," he repeated, his voice cold. "No, Emily. A mistake is forgetting an anniversary. What you did was a choice." He turned away, his mind racing with thoughts of revenge, of taking back what was rightfully his. He had been the one managing their finances, and he knew exactly what needed to be done. As Emily watched him, her tears fell silently, but Daniel felt nothing but anger. He had trusted her, loved her, and she had thrown it all away for some fleeting connection. Now, he would make sure she understood the consequences of her actions. The storm outside continued to rage, mirroring the turmoil inside their apartment. But Daniel was resolute. He would not let her betrayal destroy him. He would take back every penny they had saved and leave her with nothing. The sun barely peeked through the clouds as Daniel left the apartment, his mind set on a plan. He needed to act fast to reclaim what was his before Emily had any inkling of his intentions. The betrayal still stung like salt in an open wound, but he pushed the pain aside, focusing instead on the task at hand. His first stop was the bank. As the primary account holder on their joint savings, he had the authority to make changes without Emily's consent. The teller greeted him with a polite smile, oblivious to the storm of emotions swirling beneath his calm exterior. "I need to make a withdrawal," Daniel said, his voice steady. "Of course, sir." "How much would you like to withdraw?" the teller asked, typing away at her computer. "All of it," Daniel replied, his words clipped and precise. The teller hesitated, glancing at the screen before looking back at him. "Are you sure, sir? That's quite a substantial amount." Daniel nodded, his jaw set. "Yes, I'm sure." As he waited for the transaction to process, he couldn't help but think about the life they had planned together, the dreams they had built, now shattered by Emily's betrayal. But he refused to be a victim. He would take control, and he would make sure she felt the full weight of her actions. With the money safely transferred to his personal account, Daniel left the bank, his mind racing with possibilities. He needed to confront Emily again, to let her know exactly what he had done and why. But not yet. First, he needed to gather more evidence to ensure she couldn't weasel her way out with lies or excuses. He spent the next few days quietly observing, collecting details, and piecing together the full extent of Emily's deceit. He hacked into her emails, uncovering more exchanges with Jake, each message a dagger to his heart. But he refused to let the pain consume him. Instead, he channeled it into action, preparing for the confrontation that would change everything. Finally, the day arrived. Daniel returned home, his heart pounding with anticipation and anger. He found Emily in the living room, her face lighting up with a smile that quickly faded as she saw the intensity in his eyes. "Danny, what's going on?" she asked, her voice laced with apprehension. "We need to talk," he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. Emily swallowed hard, her hands fidgeting nervously. "About what?" "About how you threw away everything we had for some cheap thrill," Daniel spat, his words dripping with venom. Her eyes widened, fear and guilt mingling on her face. "I told you it was a mistake. I didn't mean for it to happen." "Stop saying that," Daniel snapped, his anger boiling over. "You don't accidentally cheat on someone, Emily. You made a choice and now you have to live with the consequences." "What do you mean?" she asked, her voice trembling. "I mean, I've taken back every penny we saved for that house," Daniel said, his eyes locked onto hers. "You don't get to benefit from my hard work while you're off with someone else." Emily's face crumpled, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Danny, please, we can work this out. I love you." "No, Emily," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. "You don't get to say that after what you've done. You love yourself and your own selfish desires. That's it." She reached out, desperation in her eyes, but he stepped back, shaking his head. "Don't touch me. You lost that right the moment you decided to cheat." Emily's sobs filled the room, but Daniel felt no pity. He had given her everything, and she had thrown it all away. Now, she would have to face the reality of her choices, alone and without the security of their shared dreams. As he turned to leave, he paused, looking back at her one last time. "I hope it was worth it, Emily. Because you just lost everything." With those words, he walked out, leaving her to the ruins of the life she had destroyed. Daniel drove aimlessly through the city, the weight of the confrontation still heavy on his chest. He felt a mix of relief and anger, knowing he had taken a stand but still reeling from the betrayal. He needed to clear his head, to figure out his next steps now that his life had been upended. Eventually, he found himself parked outside a small cafe, the kind of place he and Emily used to frequent on lazy Sunday mornings. The thought brought a bitter taste to his mouth, but he pushed it aside and headed inside. He ordered a coffee and sat in a corner, staring out the window at the bustling street, trying to make sense of his emotions. As he sat there, his phone buzzed with a new message. He hesitated, half expecting it to be from Emily, but when he checked, it was from his friend, Mike. "Hey man, heard about what happened. You okay?" Daniel sighed, grateful for the concern but not really in the mood to talk about it. Still, he knew he couldn't keep it all bottled up. He typed a quick reply. "Not really. It's a mess. Can we meet up?" A few minutes later, Mike walked into the cafe, his expression a mix of sympathy and anger on Daniel's behalf. He dropped into the seat across from him, shaking his head. "Man, I can't believe she did that," Mike said, his voice low and furious. "After everything you guys have been through." "Yeah, well, believe it," Daniel replied, his tone laced with bitterness. "She threw it all away for some guy named Jake." Mike leaned back, crossing his arms over his chest. "What are you going to do now?" "I took back all the money we saved." "Left her with nothing," Daniel said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. "But I don't know what to do next. Everything's just messed up." Mike nodded, understanding. "You need a place to crash? My couch is always open." "Thanks, man. I might take you up on that," Daniel said, grateful for the offer. "I just need some space to figure things out." As they talked, Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time it was a call from Emily. He stared at the screen, his jaw clenching in frustration. "You're not going to answer that, are you?" Mike asked, raising an eyebrow. Daniel shook his head. "No way. I don't need to hear more of her excuses." He let the call go to voicemail, refusing to give her the satisfaction of a response. He knew she would try to worm her way back in, to manipulate him with tears and promises, but he was done. He had to be. After a while, Mike stood up, clapping a hand on Daniel's shoulder. "Let's get out of here. You need a distraction." They left the cafe and walked through the city, the fresh air helping to clear Daniel's mind. As they passed a park, Daniel's phone buzzed once more, this time with a text from an unknown number. Daniel, it's Jake. We need to talk. Daniel stopped in his tracks, his blood boiling at the audacity of the message. You've got to be kidding me, he muttered, showing the text to Mike. That takes some nerve, Mike said, incredulous. What does he want? I don't know. But I'm going to find out, Daniel replied, his anger giving him a renewed sense of purpose. He texted back, arranging to meet Jake at a nearby bar later that evening. He needed to look the guy in the eye, to confront the person who had helped destroy his marriage. It was a risk, but one Daniel felt he had to take. As the sun set, Daniel arrived at the bar, his heart pounding with a mix of trepidation and fury. He spotted Jake sitting in a booth, looking nervous but defiant. Daniel approached, his expression hard as stone. You're Jake, Daniel asked, his voice cold. Jake nodded, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Yeah, thanks for meeting me. I didn't do this for you, Daniel snapped, sitting down. What do you want? Jake hesitated, glancing around the bar before speaking. Look, man, I didn't know she was married at first. She told me later, but by then we were already involved. Daniel clenched his fists, struggling to keep his composure. And you didn't think to back off when you found out. Jake looked down, shame flickering across his face. I should have, but she said things were bad between you two, that you were more like roommates than a couple. Daniel's anger flared, but he forced himself to stay calm. That's no excuse. You both made a choice to betray me. Jake nodded, his expression pained. I know. I'm sorry, I just thought you should hear it from me. Daniel stood up, his eyes blazing with anger. I don't need your apology, Jake. Just stay out of my life. With that, Daniel turned and walked out of the bar, his mind racing with the revelations. Emily had spun lies to justify her actions, dragging Jake into their mess. But it didn't matter. The damage was done, and now he had to find a way to move forward, leaving the wreckage behind. Daniel left the bar, the cold night air hitting him like a slap. He walked briskly down the street, trying to shake off the conversation with Jake. Every word replayed in his mind, each one a reminder of the betrayal and lies that had unraveled his life. He needed to get away, to put distance between himself and everything that reminded him of Emily. His phone buzzed again, but he ignored it, knowing it was probably Emily trying to reach him. He had nothing left to say to her, nothing she could say would change the reality of what she had done. He continued down the street, the city lights blurring as he moved through the crowd. He found himself at Mike's place, the familiar surroundings providing a small measure of comfort. Mike opened the door, taking one look at Daniel's face and stepping aside to let him in. How'd it go with Jake? Mike asked, handing Daniel a beer as they settled onto the couch. Daniel took a long swig, trying to wash away the bitter taste of the evening. He's a piece of work, he said finally. Claims he didn't know she was married at first. Like that makes it any better. Mike shook his head, anger simmering beneath his calm exterior. What a mess, man. I'm sorry you're going through this. Yeah, well, it is what it is, Daniel replied, his voice hard. I just can't believe she lied to him about us, made it seem like we were already over. People do stupid things when they're trying to justify their actions, Mike said, leaning back. Doesn't make it right, though. Daniel nodded, grateful for Mike's support. He knew he needed to focus on moving forward, on rebuilding his life without Emily. But the anger still simmered beneath the surface, a constant reminder of the betrayal. As they sat in silence, Daniel's phone buzzed again. This time, curiosity got the better of him, and he checked the message. It was from Emily, a long, rambling text filled with apologies and pleas for forgiveness. She's still trying to get in touch with you, Mike asked, noticing Daniel's expression. Yeah, Daniel said, tossing the phone onto the coffee table in frustration. She just doesn't get it. It's over. Mike nodded, understanding. You need to do what's best for you, man. Don't let her drag you back into that mess. I know, Daniel said, his voice firm. I just need to figure out what's next. The next morning, Daniel woke up early, determined to start fresh. He made a list of things he needed to do, find a new place to live, sort out the finances, and most importantly, cut all ties with Emily. He was done with the lies, the betrayal, and the pain. He spent the day apartment hunting, looking for a place that would be his alone. It was strange thinking about starting over, but he knew it was necessary. He needed a clean break, a chance to rebuild and move on. As the day wore on, Daniel found a small apartment that suited his needs. It wasn't much, but it was a start. He signed the lease, feeling a sense of relief as he took the first step toward a new life. Later that evening, he returned to the apartment he had shared with Emily, determined to pack up his things and leave for good. As he walked through the door, he found Emily sitting on the couch, her eyes red from crying. "Daniel," she said, her voice small and broken. He ignored the pang of sympathy that threatened to surface, reminding himself of the betrayal. "I'm just here to get my stuff," he said, his tone cold and detached. "Please, can we talk?" Emily pleaded, standing up and moving toward him. "There's nothing left to say," Daniel replied, brushing past her. "You made your choice." "I know I messed up," she said, desperation in her voice. "But we can fix this. We can go to counseling, work things out." Daniel stopped, turning to face her, his expression hard. "You think a few therapy sessions are going to fix this? You lied, you cheated, and you destroyed everything we had. There's no going back." Emily's eyes filled with tears, her hands shaking as she reached out to him. "Danny, please. I love you. I can't lose you." "You already did," Daniel said, his voice firm, "when you chose him over us." He turned away, heading to the bedroom to gather his things. Emily followed, her voice rising in panic. "What about the house? All our plans?" Daniel paused, looking at her with a mix of anger and sadness. "Those plans don't mean anything now. You threw them away." As he packed, Emily continued to plead, but Daniel tuned her out, focusing on the task at hand. He knew he had to be strong, to resist the pull of her words and the memories they shared. It was over, and he needed to move on. With his bags packed, Daniel walked to the door, pausing one last time. "Goodbye, Emily. I hope you figure out what you really want." And with that, he left, stepping into the night and leaving behind the life he once knew. It was time to start anew, to rebuild and find a future that was truly his own. Daniel's footsteps echoed in the hallway as he left the apartment for the last time. He felt a strange mix of liberation and loss, but he pushed those emotions aside, focusing on the future. He had a new apartment, a fresh start, and he was determined to make the most of it. As he settled into his new place, Daniel threw himself into work, taking on extra projects and responsibilities. The distraction was welcome, a way to keep his mind occupied and away from thoughts of Emily. His colleagues noticed the change, but he brushed off their concerns, assuring them he was fine. One evening, as Daniel was wrapping up a late shift, his phone buzzed with a call from Mike. He hesitated, considering letting it go to voicemail, but then decided to answer. "Hey, Mike," Daniel said, trying to sound upbeat. "Hey, man, how's the new place?" Mike asked, his voice warm and friendly. "It's good. Small. But it works," Daniel replied, leaning back in his chair. "Glad to hear it," Mike said. "Listen, I was thinking we should grab a drink sometime. Get you out of that apartment and back into the world." Daniel chuckled, appreciating the offer. "Yeah, I could use a night out. How about tomorrow?" "Perfect. I'll text you the details," Mike said, sounding pleased. The next evening, Daniel met Mike at a local bar, the familiar buzz of conversation and clinking glasses a welcome change from the solitude of his apartment. They found a table near the back, away from the crowd, and ordered a couple of beers. As they talked, Daniel felt a sense of normalcy returning, the weight of the past few weeks slowly lifting. But just as he began to relax, his phone buzzed with a new message. He glanced at the screen, his stomach twisting as he saw Emily's name. "She's still trying to get in touch with you?" Mike asked, noticing Daniel's expression. "Yeah," Daniel said, irritation creeping into his voice. "I don't know why she can't just let it go." "I want me to deal with it," Mike offered, half joking. Daniel shook his head, trying to ignore the message. "No, it's fine. I just wish she'd get the hint." As the night went on, Daniel found himself enjoying the conversation, the laughter, and the camaraderie. It felt good to be around friends, to feel like himself again. But as they were leaving the bar, Daniel's phone buzzed once more, this time with a call from an unknown number. He hesitated, then answered, curiosity getting the better of him. "Hello." Daniel, a woman's voice said, hesitant and unfamiliar. "Yeah, who's this?" Daniel asked, confused. "It's Sarah." Emily's friend, the voice replied, a hint of urgency in her tone. Daniel frowned, wondering what this was about. "What do you want, Sarah?" "Look, I know you don't want to hear from me, but I thought you should know." Emily's in trouble, Sarah said, her voice low and serious. Daniel's heart skipped a beat, a mix of concern and skepticism flooding his mind. What kind of trouble? She's been drinking a lot, and she lost her job, Sarah explained, the words tumbling out in a rush. She's not handling things well, and I'm worried about her. Daniel felt a flicker of sympathy, but he quickly squashed it, reminding himself of the pain Emily had caused. And what do you expect me to do about it? I don't know. Just, maybe talk to her? She's really struggling, Sarah said, her voice pleading. Daniel sighed, torn between his anger and the lingering care he still felt. I'll think about it, he said, finally ending the call. Mike watched him, concern etched on his face. Everything okay? Emily's in a bad spot, Daniel said, frustration lacing his words. Her friend thinks I should help. And what do you think? Mike asked, genuinely curious. I think she made her bed, and now she has to lie in it, Daniel replied, his tone harsh. But part of me still, I don't know. Mike nodded, understanding the conflict. It's up to you, man. Just do what feels right for you. Over the next few days, Daniel wrestled with his decision, the conversation with Sarah replaying in his mind. He knew he couldn't just ignore it, but he also didn't want to be dragged back into Emily's chaos. Finally, he decided to reach out, if only to see for himself how bad things really were. He called Emily, his heart pounding as he waited for her to pick up. Emily's voice came through, surprised and hesitant. Yeah, it's me, Daniel said, his voice steady. I heard you've been having a rough time. Emily sighed, the sound heavy with emotion. I guess you could say that. What's going on? Daniel asked, trying to keep his tone neutral. I lost my job, Emily admitted, her voice small. And I've been drinking too much. It's just, everything's falling apart. Daniel felt a pang of sympathy, but he kept his guard up. You did this to yourself, Emily. You know that, right? I know, she said, her voice breaking. I don't know how to fix it. Daniel paused, considering his next words carefully. You need to get help, professional help. I can't be the one to fix this for you. I know, she repeated, sounding defeated. I miss you. Daniel closed his eyes, the words tugging at his heart despite everything. I miss what we had too. But it's gone now. There was a long silence on the line, the weight of their shared history hanging between them. Finally, Daniel spoke again, his voice firm. Take care of yourself, Emily. It's time for both of us to move on. With that, he ended the call, feeling a strange mix of relief and sadness. It was the closure he needed, a final step toward healing and moving forward. And as he set the phone down, he knew he was ready to embrace whatever came next.